The chandelier in what used to be my dining room cast dancing shadows across my sister Meredith's perfectly manicured nails as she gestured dramatically toward the kitchen. "Obviously we'll need to gut this entire wall for the catering station," she declared, her voice carrying that particular tone she'd perfected since childhood, the one that made everyone else's opinions irrelevant. Mom nodded enthusiastically from her perch on my antique sofa, the same sofa she'd helped me carefully select 3 years ago when I first bought the Victorian mansion. "Brilliant, honey. The flow will be so much better without that wall." She turned to me with that practiced smile that never quite reached her eyes. "Emma, you don't mind, do you? It's for family." I stood in the doorway of my own home, watching my family redesign my life around my sister's third engagement. The wedding planner, a sharp-featured woman named Vivian who clearly charged by the square foot of audacity, spread architectural plans across my dining table like she owned the place. Which, according to the conversation flowing around me, she apparently did. "The ceremony will be perfect in the backyard," Meredith continued, her fiancé Trevor nodding along like a dashboard bobblehead. "We'll need to remove those rose bushes, of course. They don't match my color scheme." Those rose bushes had taken me 2 years to establish. I'd researched heritage varieties, amended the soil and nursed them through their first harsh winter. But Meredith had always been allergic to anything that didn't revolve around her immediate desires. "What about permits?" I asked quietly, though I already knew the answer. "Historic district regulations?" Dad waved his hand dismissively. "Your mother already spoke to Councilman Roberts. Family friend, you know. We'll handle the paperwork." He said it like I was a child worried about homework rather than a homeowner concerned about property law. The truth was they had no idea what they were handling. While Meredith had been planning her dream wedding for the past 6 months, I'd been quietly building something they couldn't even comprehend. The consulting firm I'd launched 18 months ago had just secured a contract with the state's Department of Historic Preservation. My expertise in Victorian restoration had caught the attention of people who actually mattered in my field. "The timeline is tight," Vivian announced, consulting her tablet. 6 weeks to complete renovations, install the kitchen extension and landscape the grounds. I've already scheduled the demolition crew for Monday." "Demolition crew?" I repeated. "For the interior walls, obviously," Meredith sighed dramatically. "Try to keep up, Em. This is bigger than just your little house. The Ashford family wedding is going to be the social event of the season." Trevor's family money had definitely gone to Meredith's head, though I suspected his trust fund was smaller than his ego suggested. Still, the Ashford name carried weight in our small city, and Mom had been practically vibrating with social climbing energy since the engagement announcement. "I should probably mention," I said carefully, "that there might be some complications with the permits." "Nothing we can't handle," Dad assured me, his real estate agent confidence in full display. "I've been selling houses in this town for 25 years. Know all the right people." What Dad didn't know was that those right people were currently investigating several cases of permit fraud involving historic properties. What none of them knew was that I'd been consulting on those very investigations for the past 3 months. "The guest list is up to 200, Mom added excitedly. "The governor's wife confirmed yesterday." "Governor's wife?" I asked. "Patricia Henley," Meredith preened. "Trevor's mother went to boarding school with her. They're practically sisters." I bit back my smile. Patricia Henley was indeed the governor's wife. She was also the chairwoman of the State Historic Preservation Board and had personally commissioned my firm to assess Victorian properties threatened by illegal renovations. We'd been working closely together for months. "Well," I said slowly, "I suppose if everything is already decided." "That's the spirit," Dad beamed. "Family comes first, right, sweetheart?" Family. The word had lost most of its meaning somewhere between Meredith's first wedding disaster 2 years ago and Mom's endless comparisons between my little hobbies and Meredith's real achievements. Meredith's real achievements consisted primarily of a communications degree she'd never used and a talent for finding men willing to finance her lifestyle aspirations. "I'll need to check a few things first," I said, pulling out my phone. "Legal requirements, you understand." "Always so cautious," Mom laughed, the sound brittle around the edges. "Sometimes you just have to take risks, Emma. That's how real success happens." Real success. Like my sister's track record of failed engagements and my mother's definition of achievement being married to someone else's accomplishments. Meanwhile, my restoration consultancy was quietly revolutionizing how the state approached historic preservation, but since it didn't come with a wedding ring or social status, it barely registered on their radar. I stepped into my kitchen, the kitchen they planned to demolish, and sent a quick text to my contact at the county recorder's office. Sarah Martinez had become more than just a professional connection over the past year. She'd become a friend who understood the value of historical integrity. "Hey Sarah, need a favor. Can you send me the current deed and any restrictions for 847 Maple Street? Sippy, please." Her response came within minutes. "Already pulling it. Heard through the grapevine someone was planning major renovations. You stopped this train wreck yet?" "Working on it," I replied. When I returned to the living room, Vivian was measuring walls and making notes about load-bearing beams. "The structural engineer will be here tomorrow morning," she announced. "We'll start with the kitchen wall removal." "Actually," I said, my phone buzzing with an incoming email, "I think we need to pause for just a moment." "Pause." Meredith's voice went up an octave. "Emma, the wedding is in 8 weeks. We don't have time for your neurotic perfectionism." My neurotic perfectionism had recently saved 3 historic mansions from irreversible damage, but explaining that would require them to actually listen. Instead, I opened Sarah's email and scanned the documentation she'd sent. The deed was exactly what I expected. What they didn't expect was the conservation easement that had been placed on the property 6 months before I purchased it. What they really didn't expect was the clause that made any unauthorized structural alterations a federal offense. "There's something you should know about the house," I said quietly. "What now?" Dad's patience was wearing thin. "It's under a federal conservation easement. Any structural modifications require approval from both the State Historic Preservation Office and the Department of the Interior." The room went quiet except for Vivian's pen scratching against her notepad. "What does that mean?" Trevor asked, speaking for the first time since arriving. "It means," I continued, "that unauthorized alterations could result in federal criminal charges, fines up to $250,000, and mandatory restoration at the violator's expense." "That's ridiculous," Meredith snapped. "You bought this house for family use. You can't just hide behind legal technicalities to ruin my wedding." "I'm not hiding behind anything. I'm trying to prevent all of us from committing federal crimes." Mom's face had gone pale. "Federal crimes? Emma, that seems extreme." "The conservation easement isn't extreme, Mom. It's legal reality. This house is listed as a contributing structure to the Maple Street Historic District. Every window, every original wall, every architectural detail is protected." Vivian cleared her throat. "Perhaps there's some flexibility in the interpretation." "There isn't," I said firmly. "I've been working with the State Historic Preservation Office for months. They take these violations very seriously." "Working with them how?" Dad demanded. This was the moment I'd been avoiding for over a year. The moment when I'd have to explain that while they saw me as their cautious, underachieving daughter, the rest of the state saw me differently. "I'm a consulting specialist for the Department of Historic Preservation. I assess properties for conservation compliance and investigate violations." The silence stretched long enough for me to hear the grandfather clock in the hallway chiming 3 o'clock. "You're what?" Meredith's voice was barely above a whisper. "I evaluate historic properties for the state. It's what I've been doing since I left the marketing firm. My consultancy works directly with government agencies to preserve architectural heritage." "You investigate violations?" Mom asked slowly. "Among other things, yes. I've consulted on several cases involving illegal renovations to protected properties. The penalties are severe and they're enforced." Trevor's face had gone ashen. "What kind of penalties?" "Criminal prosecution, substantial fines, and mandatory restoration. One family last year faced $180,000 in penalties for removing original millwork from their protected Victorian." Vivian was already packing up her plans. "I think there might be some miscommunication about the property status. Perhaps we should explore alternative venues." "Alternative venues?" Meredith's voice cracked. This was supposed to be perfect. "The invitations are already ordered." "The country club is lovely," I suggested gently, "and legally compliant." "The country club isn't historic," Mom protested. "It doesn't have the same elegance." Historic properties come with historic responsibilities, I replied. That's why the easements exist. Dad was staring at me like he'd never seen me before. How long have you been doing this work, Emma? 18 months. Since I started my consultancy. And you never mentioned it because? Because every family dinner conversation centered on Meredith's latest drama. Because my career updates were met with polite disinterest while Meredith's shopping expeditions warranted detailed discussions. Because they defined me as the quiet, practical one who handled family logistics while Meredith sparkled in the spotlight. I tried to share what I was doing, I said carefully. Remember Christmas dinner when I mentioned the Victorian Preservation Project? You said it sounded academically interesting, and changed the subject to Meredith's engagement photos. The memory hung in the air, uncomfortable and undeniable. My phone buzzed with another text from Sarah. County Commissioner wants to speak with you about the Maple Street inquiry. Someone made inquiries about fast-tracking permits. Should I schedule a call? Actually, I said, reading the message, there's something else you should know. Councilman Roberts contacted the county about expediting permits for this address. That's good, right? Mom asked hopefully. Not when the permits would be illegal to issue. The county commissioner wants to discuss who made the inquiry and why they thought federal conservation easements could be bypassed through local channels. Dad's real estate agent confidence finally cracked. I just asked about the standard renovation permits. For a federally protected property, that's going to require some explanation. Trevor stood abruptly. Meredith, maybe we should reconsider the venue options. Reconsider. Meredith's voice rose to near shriek level. 6 weeks before the wedding? After we've told everyone about this amazing historic mansion? Better than explaining federal criminal charges to the Ashford family, Trevor muttered. And there was the first crack in their perfect wedding fantasy, created not by my neurotic perfectionism, but by legal reality they'd chosen to ignore. I can help you find alternative venues, I offered. My work with the Preservation Office means I know which properties can legally accommodate events. Your work, Meredith repeated bitterly. When did you become such an expert on everything? The question stung because it revealed how little they actually knew about my life. While they'd been focused on Meredith's romantic drama, I'd quietly built a career that mattered. While they'd dismissed my interests as hobbies, state agencies had been implementing my recommendations for preserving architectural heritage. I became an expert by studying what I love and building something meaningful with that knowledge, I said simply. Vivian finished packing her materials. I'll send you a list of suitable venues, but given the timeline, options will be limited. After she left, my family sat in my living room, my legally protected, historically significant living room, looking like they'd been slapped with reality. The country club could work, Mom said finally, her voice small. It'll have to work, Trevor agreed. My family cannot be associated with federal legal violations. Meredith buried her face in her hands. This is humiliating. How am I supposed to explain this to everyone? You tell them the truth, I suggested. That you learned new information about the property restrictions and chose to respect legal requirements. Or you could tell them that your sister is an expert in historic preservation who saved your family from federal prosecution, Dad said quietly. It was the first acknowledgement that I might actually know what I was talking about. Over the following weeks, I watched my family navigate the reality of my actual career. The country club wedding was elegant and legally compliant. The governor's wife attended and spent 20 minutes discussing my recent report on statewide preservation priorities. She offered me a position on the State Heritage Commission, which I accepted. Meredith's wedding was beautiful, though smaller than originally planned. Trevor's family was impressed by my professional connections, particularly when the lieutenant governor stopped by during cocktail hour to discuss my upcoming presentation to the state legislature. The family dynamics didn't change overnight, but something fundamental had shifted. My career was no longer invisible, my expertise no longer dismissible. The quiet, practical daughter had turned out to be quietly revolutionary in her field. 6 months later, when Meredith and Trevor announced they were looking for a historic home to purchase, they called me first. Not for family logistics or practical support, but for professional expertise they finally understood was worth respecting. The conservation easement on my house remained intact, protecting not just architectural details but boundaries I'd learned to value. Some things I'd discovered were worth more than family approval, starting with professional respect and legal integrity. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Historic District meeting next week. Ready to present the new preservation guidelines? Ready, I replied, and for the first time in years I truly was.